I think the most addictive kind of granola is the kind that has big clusters. That's why I'm making for you today a chunky almond granola. You can pick up the pieces as a standalone snack or sprinkle the crumbles over your yogurt. It's truly the best of both worlds, and you'll find yourself wanting to make this over and over again. So come on, grab your oats and I'll show you how to make this. What's up, universe? Welcome back to our kitchen. And in case you're new here, I'm Julie Yoon. I'm a chef, I'm a mom, and for this season of our show, our focus is on some easy and yummy snacks that we can actually execute and film while our son Lincoln naps. With all that said, I think it's time for some chunky almond granola. What you're gonna need is old-fashioned oats, almonds, maple syrup, light brown sugar, vanilla extract, fine salt, vegetable oil, and raisins. We're gonna start off by chopping up some almonds, and this is probably the most labor-intensive part of the recipe. And you're just, that's okay. And you can use a food processor if you want to, but why bother? Well, maybe that's why you should use a food processor. I was gonna say, why bother dirtying up a food processor for just this one step? I have a cup of almonds, and they're just whole, unsalted, raw. You just want them in a coarse chop. And I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like it's all these almonds that make this granola truly addictive. I think this is a great stress reliever. There's something so satisfying about this. All right, I think that's good enough for me. I'm gonna leave them a bit chunky. Just put them back in their little bowl they came from. Okay, let's set that aside for a minute and work on our granola glue. We're just gonna grab 2.5 tablespoons, packed tablespoons, like press it into your tablespoon of light brown sugar. So you can see they're like little globs. And then equal parts, 2.5 tablespoons of maple syrup. Then you need 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, pure vanilla extract, not imitation, and a 1/4 teaspoon of fine salt. You know me, I'm all about kosher salt, but for baking and dessert recipes, usually I like to use fine. Just gonna whisk that up to break up the clumps of the brown sugar, and it does dissolve pretty nicely. And then you're gonna grab a 1/4 cup of vegetable or canola oil, and you're just gonna slowly stream that in. Kind of makes me feel like I'm making a salad dressing. Beautiful and glossy. Lastly, you're just gonna fold in your oats. I have 2.5 cups old-fashioned rolled oats. So not steel cut, not instant. I should switch over to a spatula. And then we're gonna add our cup of chopped almonds. I will also say that I have reserved on the side a cup of regular raisins, and we're not gonna put this in right now because as it bakes, you don't want the dried fruit to get too chewy and hard, and that will happen if you bake it. So we're just gonna leave it on the side, and once the granola is completely baked and cooled, we're gonna add in the raisins then. So just keep that in mind, keep it off to the side. You just take your time and fold until you can see that it's all moistened and nicely coated. During this time, you should have your oven preheated to 325 degrees, and then your rack moved up to the upper middle portion. Okay, that looks good to me. You want to grab yourself a 13 by 9 inch baking pan. So I'm just using this like Pyrex brand kind. And then you're going to cut yourself 2 pieces of parchment paper and make a sling. So they're going to go perpendicular to each other so they fit into the pan. And then if it seems like it's bunching up a little bit, you can always use a little bit of nonstick spray to act as another adhesive. And then maybe one on top. There you go. And it shouldn't budge on you now. And this parchment paper is what's gonna help you lift the granola out of the pan once it's done. This is kind of a different way of cooking granola because I've made granola recipes in the past too, where you're just traditionally putting on a baking sheet and just tossing it and it's all crumbly. I love that kind of granola too, but I really started to enjoy this kind where you're pressing it into the pan and somewhat making a bark or like a solid cookie in a way. And then you're gonna break up those pieces by hand, and you can make it as big or small as you want. So if you're a fan of the crumbly kind, just break it all the way up. And if you like the chunks like I do, then you just break it into larger pieces, and then they're great for snacking. You want to spread your granola all the way to the edges and the corners, making sure it's still on the parchment sling. When I made my test batch of this, Joe and I could not stop eating it. It's truly addictive. Then you're going to use either another piece of parchment, maybe even the bottom of like a bowl that you have, or I'm going to use kitchen gloves. So I'm just going to use a little bit of a firm touch and try to pack it in like a cake. But it's not so sticky, it is quite loose. Alternatively, like I said, you can always just put a piece of parchment paper on top and then just press down too. Okay, I'm adding a little bit more pressure. Now that it's all nicely packed in, we're gonna pop it into the oven for anywhere between 30 to 35 minutes. But at the 30-minute mark, you do wanna watch it and make sure that it's not browning too much. Make sure that you do rotate the pan about halfway through the cooking time. And then it's not going to be completely hardened once it comes out of the oven. It needs about an hour to cool on a baking rack. And when it does, it'll harden enough for you to crumble it. All right, so the granola had a long chance to cool off, and that's what you're gonna need. You need some patience. So I waited for a little over an hour, and if you notice, you can actually pick up the granola by the sling, and I'm just gonna lift up chunks of it and break it into a large bowl. And you'll see that some turn into little crumbles, and depending on how hard you break it, some will be left as clusters. Now, if you want it to be a pure snack, then you can just leave it as whole and as large as this if you'd like. It's like a nice big cookie or a cracker. But this is how you make those big clusters because it was packed so nicely into the dish. If it was made the traditional way, using a sheet pan and just tossing it around, it would all be loose like this. And you'll notice that as it sits even longer, it will firm up just a tad more. So that's why you want to wait to let it cool completely. There is one last step. Remember those raisins? We have that cup of raisins. We are going to chop them because then they'll be a little bit more sticky. So then they'll stick onto the pieces of granola, even though we didn't bake them. It's also nice that you don't have to eat like a full raisin for every single bite of granola. So I left the granola quite chunky on purpose because once you toss the raisins, it'll probably break up even more because it is brittle. And that's it, guys. All you gotta do is store your completely cooled granola in an airtight container. It should be able to keep up anywhere between a week to 2 weeks, but I don't think it'll last that long. I mean, it's so snackable and so sprinkleable, so there's nothing left to do but to taste it. Let me tell you that when this is baking in the oven, it just fills your entire house. It smells amazing. It's like so nutty and vanilla-y. Why don't you start ahead with the yogurt? Why don't you?
I will. I'm staring at it.
I actually divided the granola. I mean, there's a lot more left over, but into the chunk clusters and the loose pieces. So you can go either way. The more firmly you press your granola into the pan, the longer you let it cool, and maybe even the longer that you let it cook in the oven, the firmer it will be, so the more success you'll have in getting these desired chunks and clusters. And we've had this granola before, so we already know what it tastes like, but man, it's good.
It's so delicious, especially with the yogurt. The crunch is nice and perfect.
The thing I like most about this granola is that it's not too sweet. It is still brittle, and I think it does take a while to firm up, because even as we were doing our photo shoot, it firmed up even more. So I think that's a good tip to, the longer you let it cool in the pan, the better you'll have in success. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's so nutty. The raisins are just the right amount of sweetness. And I don't know, here's more crumbly. Go at it. It's like one of my favorite things these days, and I love it. Whenever I'm hungry, I tend to go for this as a snack. For substitutions, if you wanted to replace the almonds with any other kind of nut of your choice, you probably could, except for the almonds do add a satisfying crunch to it, so I like it. But you can mix it up with any kind of dried fruit because you're just tossing it at the end. There's no harm or foul with whatever chopped up fruit that you want, like apricots, even cranberries. Well, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this recipe and video, please let us know by pushing like, leave a comment down below, subscribe to our channel, and hit that bell for notifications so that you know every time we upload a new video. The written recipe is on chefjulian.com, and we'll leave a direct link for you down below. Thanks so much for watching.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
So this is the part that's
It's so delicious, especially with the yogurt. Combination, gorgeous.
That one's for you, Connie. I'm gonna leave that in the bloopers. Our cousin Connie loves it when Joe says random things. So I'm leaving this one in. It just has like a nice subtle sweetness instead of a cloying sweetness. Why are you cracking up?
I'm not cracking up.
You are.